The title of the meeting is on the tragedy of Syriza, and I'm very pleased to welcome our speaker, Panos Garganas, who is a member of the SEK, which is the sister organisation of the Socialist Workers' Party in Greece. He's based in Athens. He's also the editor of Workers' Solidarity, the newspaper of that organisation. Panos is going to speak for about 30 minutes, and after that there will be plenty of time for people to ask questions or make any points. If you would like to speak, then please just indicate by putting your hand up, and I will call people two at a time to come to the front as well, because the meetings will be recorded. But without further ado, I would like to hand over to Panos.
Well, comrades, the experience of Syriza in government is a tragedy. Some might say it's a Greek tragedy. I would say it's an international tragedy, because what's happening in Greece, the experience of a left reformist party in office, is something that's relevant to people in many, many countries. If we want to describe in a few words what that tragedy is, it's the fact that Syriza is adapting to the needs of Greek capitalism in office very, very quickly. And that means it is shifting to the right day by day. I'll give you a few examples of what that means. The first is on the economy. Just a few weeks back, a new agreement was reached between the Greek government and the European Union and the International Monetary Fund. This agreement involves a new wave of cuts after 7 years of terrible austerity in Greece. Most of you probably know that the bailouts agreed by the previous governments since 2010 have meant a terrible recession for 7 years, high unemployment, and very deep cuts in wages and pensions. Now, on top of that comes this new agreement that says the Greek government must ensure there is a budget surplus of 3.5% of gross domestic product over the next 4 or 5 years. And then after that, for another large number of years, until 2060, the Greek budget must produce a surplus of 2% every year. Numbers may be a bit abstract. What this means, and this was voted in the Greek parliament just a few weeks ago. First is a new round of cuts on pensions. In 2 years from now, every pension in Greece will have to be estimated again on a new formula. And the new formula means that everybody will experience a cut on top of the cuts that they have experienced up to now. 20% to 30%, that's the range of the cuts that are coming up for old age pensioners. And then when it comes to wages, a second section of the bill changes the rules for taxation. Up to now, anybody who had an income of 12,000 euros a year, 1,000 euros a month, didn't have to pay income tax. Now that's being abolished. Now people will have to start paying income tax from £6,000, 6,000 euros per year. So really low-income workers, 500 euros a month. All right, Greece is not in the center of Europe, but even for Greece, 500 euros a month is very, very little. These people will have to pay tax. So when it comes to the economy, the attack is very, very savage. This is not the end of the story. Up until now, Syriza in office would explain away these kind of policies by saying, it's not our policy, it's being forced on us. The relation of forces between Greece, a small country, and the European Union and the IMF is so bad, there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to implement the policy whether I like it or not. Not anymore. Now they've moved on. Now they say this policy is good. This policy will end the recession in Greece, it'll bring investment, and it'll bring jobs. So Syriza is effectively reproducing the neoliberal idea that if you cut back wages and labor costs, that will bring in investment and help the economy to grow. When I say this is not a turn that's being imposed by the European Union, it's rather Syriza adapting to the needs of Greek capitalism, the Greek ruling class. The most clear way to see this is when we see the turn to the right on foreign policy. Now, left-wingers in Greece would expect that, okay, on the economy, Syriza will be bad because it has to give in to so much pressure. But then in many other areas, it'll be a progressive government, for example, on foreign policy. Not true. Not true. Most of you probably know that there was an attack on Syria by the Sixth Fleet, the American fleet in the Mediterranean, cruise missiles and so on, something we hadn't seen for many years. The ships that launched the missiles came from Crete. They used the Greek-American base in Suda. And the Syriza government is proud of that. They're not apologizing. The foreign minister, Kodias, claims that he established contact with Donald Trump before the American election. So Greek foreign policy is on a very good ground. They've got good contacts in Washington, and that's good for Greek capitalism. Probably true. Probably, not really, because these kind of involvement in what's happening in the Middle East is very dangerous. It's accentuating tensions between Greece and Turkey, traditionally very hostile. This is getting worse. So it's an adventurous policy, but certainly it's not a policy of the left. So I think I've given enough examples of what it means to adapt, how advanced and quick the Syriza turn to the right has been. This is the bad news. The good news is that there is a fight back. There's a situation where people are not taking this lying down. Of course, there was disappointment when Syriza started capitulating back in 2 years ago. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of disappointment after the referendum in Greece in the summer of 2015, when people voted to reject the agreement with the European Union. That meant this new round of austerity, and the government turned the vote upside down. They proceeded to sign the agreement despite the referendum result. That was a huge disappointment for people, and we've been through a period where people were wondering why this is happening and what on earth can be done. But this is behind us now. Gradually, people are starting to fight back. The surge to the left that brought Syriza to power in 2015 is not finished. The fact that the government is shifting to the right doesn't mean that the people who voted for Syriza follow on this track and turning to the right. Quite the opposite is happening. So, on the 17th of May, when the bill was debated in Parliament that cuts pensions and increases taxation on low-wage workers, there was a general strike, and the strike was very successful. Many people were surprised by the scale of strike action and the size of the strike rallies. So this was a pleasant surprise. It was a very clear indication that people are leaving disappointment behind them and are starting to look on how they can fight back. It wasn't something that was a one-off event. A bit later, there was a very big and very successful strike by local government workers. Because of the pressures of the agreement to get a budget surplus, there was an attempt to sack 10,000 contract workers in local authorities. A sudden death sort of thing, that a court ruled that the contracts are invalid, and the next day 10,000 people were up in the air, losing their jobs. Some of them had the pressure that they had been paid by mistake. They should give money back to the state because their contracts were not legal, that sort of thing. It was a terrible shock, but the response was an 11-day strike with occupations in garages. No garbage collection for 11 days in the middle of a heat wave in Greece. So a lot of pressure on the government. A very successful strike. They had to capitulate. People are back at their jobs. 10,000 people got their jobs back. Of course, with many loopholes, with many strings attached for the courts to rule that not everybody is on the same level. Some people are different from others, and so on. But this is all the more reason why the fight back will continue. People will have to fight to save their jobs. It's not automatic that the government will keep the promise that ended the strike. But the message is very clear. If you strike, you can get your job back. If you just stay at home and cry because Tsipras is betraying you, well, then you get stabbed in the back. There are other indications of people fighting back. There's the fight against racist attacks. Now, there was a small place just outside Athens. It produces plastic bags, and many of the big multinationals that have chains in Greece get supplied by this small factory. It employs mostly migrant workers, people from Pakistan. The workforce is, 60, 70 people, maybe 50 people are migrants from Pakistan. They were treated terribly by the boss in terms of conditions and also in terms of racist abuse. But one day the boss overreached. He and his people attacked one of the workers that was sacked, and he was demanding that due procedures should be followed, that he should get his papers in order, and so on. So he was physically attacked. And when that happened, people walked out on strike. They stayed on strike for 19 days, and they won. Everybody that was given the sack were reinstated, and the boss had to say, now you're going to have a canteen, you're going to have clean water, you're going to have proper conditions in the factory. Of course, the real protagonists were the workers that went on strike, but there was a wave of solidarity with the strikers from the unions, from the anti-fascist movement. KFR, the anti-racist, anti-fascist movement, was there from day one. So it was very clear that they were not on their own. And this is one way that the surge to the left in Greece is not finished. People are fighting back against austerity, but they're fighting back also against racism. I'll give you another example. Just to the west of Athens, there's an area where there are field workers, again, migrant workers, working in the fields. And there was a fascist gang that was carrying out attacks on people as they got back home from work to terrorize them. That was happening over some time. 2-3 months. There were probably 50 victims of racist attacks by this fascist gang. So the Pakistan community and KFR decided to call a demonstration in the area against the attacks. It was a very difficult demonstration because the people who were on the demo had to confront the fascists that were running parallel to the demonstration with the help of the police. But they held their ground, and that meant it became a big event. There was a follow-up demonstration, and the police had to withdraw the protection from the fascist gang. 7 members of the gang were arrested. So there was another victory for the anti-racist movement. And again, the people involved were members of the Pakistani community, but the solidarity in the area, this is the part of Athens that's an industrial zone. So the solidarity came from local workers. Again, I could give many, many examples on that front, on how anti-racist and anti-fascist work has made progress in Greece. One indication is the trial of Golden Dawn. As you may know, the leading members of Golden Dawn are on trial. A trial that started 2 years ago. They're accused of organizing the murders of Pavlos Fyssas and the attacks on trade unionists, Communist Party members, and so on. Now, when this trial started, there was a lot of protection for the accused. Every rule was used to delay the trial, and so on. The fact that Golden Dawn has MPs, they are supposedly an official party in the Greek parliament, was used as cover, not only from the right, but also from Syriza. The speaker of the Greek parliament is a member of Syriza, both in the previous parliament in 2015 and in the current parliament. They accepted, until recently, that Golden Dawn are an official party represented in the Greek parliament, so they enjoy all the privileges of a party that's represented in parliament. Not anymore. Not anymore. There's been a change. Because of all this activity. Now, recently, there was debate in the Greek parliament, and there was an exchange between Alexis Tsipras, the prime minister, and the leader of the Tory party in Greece. They are the official opposition. On how do you characterize Golden Dawn? Is it an official party of the Greek parliament, or is it a criminal gang? And to the amazement of many people, Alexis Tsipras challenged the right-wing, the Tory leader. Do you agree they're a criminal gang? And he had to say, well, yes, they are a party, but also they have many features of a criminal gang. Now, this is a development that didn't come about in Parliament. It came about through people fighting back in the streets, and it's another indication that the mood to the left is very real in Greece. One other indication is the revival in interest in the Russian Revolution. This is the 100 years since the Russian Revolution. At the start of the year, we decided to translate Victor Serge, Year One of the Russian Revolution. There was no Greek translation for decades. It's amazing, but still. So we decided to publish a Greek edition of Victor Serge on Year One of the Russian Revolution. It has sold out in 6 months. So I think it's fair to say that despite the experience of Syriza in government and the betrayals, people are fighting back and radicalizing. It even shows in opinion polls. There was recently a survey on what people think of the agreement with the European Union. 67% of all those asked said it's a bad agreement. Of those, 55% of Syriza voters in 2015 said it's a bad agreement. So people who voted for Syriza are criticizing their own government for signing up with the European Union new round of austerity. So on the basis of this, I think we can say that it is possible to try and build a left alternative to Syriza in Greece. This is what we are trying to do. This is what the Greek Socialist Workers' Party is trying to do. We are part of a coalition of the anti-capitalist left called Anti-austerity. And what we are saying is that in these conditions, the whole left to the left of Syriza, the Communist Party, Popular Unity, that are the people who broke away from Syriza in 2015, and the anti-capitalist left should join forces in supporting the strikes, in supporting the occupations, in supporting the anti-racist and anti-fascist demonstrations. Some of this is happening. We are making some headway. There is a big problem of sectarianism on the Greek left. The Communist Party doesn't cooperate with anybody else They say they are the party of the working class. Everybody else has to line up behind them. There's no question of making alliances. But still, despite these problems, there is progress. So one aspect of trying to move forward from the experience of Syriza is in proposing and promoting joint action when people fight back. Another aspect is suggesting what a left alternative means. Opening up the debate why Syriza is failing, why you can't have change by just through parliament. You can win the election, you can have left-wingers heading the ministries, but that doesn't translate into controlling the vital elements that are needed for change. You don't control the economy, that's very clear. The banks, the leading companies, and so on. You don't control the army. You don't control even the diplomats in the Foreign Office. They are pursuing the policies that are traditional to Greek capitalism. And the ministers are just signing up to these policies. So this is a very important debate to say we have to move on. We just can't pin our hopes that in the next general election, this surge to the left that continues will produce more left-wing members of parliament. The Communist Party will have a bigger group, Popular Unity will get into parliament, maybe even the anti-capitalist left will get into parliament. But that's not the point. That's not the point. That will not be the crucial element in making a difference. The crucial element will be whether people who are fighting back are organized so they can impose through their own action their demands. The way the local government workers got their jobs back, the way the Pakistani workers fought back against racist bosses and racist attacks, and so on. There is a debate going on trying to generalize this and say, okay, so we need an anti-capitalist program. We need a program that says nationalize the banks, stop paying the debt, confront the European Union. If the European Central Bank wants to shut down the Greek banks, well, to hell with the European Central Bank. Break with the European Union. That's the sort of policy that is being debated. It's obviously a difficult effort. It's not easy. We have to overcome the disappointment from the sellout of Syriza and try to organize in that direction. But again, we have to keep in mind that we are not alone. We take encouragement from the fact that there is a surge to the left, not just in Greece anymore, but in other countries, including this country. The Corbyn surge is a lot of encouragement to comrades fighting back in Greece. So this is what I want to end up with. What you do, comrades, will make a difference, not just in this country, it'll make a difference in Greece. With your help, we may be able to show that the tragedy of Syriza is not the end of the story. There's a left that's prepared to go way beyond where Syriza reached.
Can I address this? Hi, yes. Thank you for that talk, Panos. And what I really want to ask a question, and it's a genuine question, a bit context to that. I know that before Syriza came to power, there was a meeting in one of the workers-run hotels, very important one in Buenos Aires, which has just fought off a recent threat to its operation there successfully. But there was a meeting there with Greek activists from Syriza and I think some other organizations and workers-occupied factories. And I came across later, subsequently, by accident, almost accidentally, somewhere that, in Argentina you have a law of expropriation that was fought for on the streets and workers' occupations and so on and so forth, or factories. And that law of expropriation basically allows the state to use the existing laws of expropriation to when they are in difficulties or what have you, to expropriate them to the companies, to the workers. And on that basis, that movement has been a growing movement in Argentina. Now, I'm wondering, I know there have been some occupations in Greece, and I know precisely that one of the problems is, I imagine, the complications of the Greek economy, about it being, having a large, relatively large service sector, a small industrial sector, and a large small-scale agricultural sector. But I was wondering, what are the prospects? First of all, why didn't it actually emerge more clearly as a proposal on the agenda so far, in terms of workers taking over the companies, the banks, and so on and so forth, perhaps even the services, and collectivization of the land, for example, one thing. And why could it potentially be one way forward? I know it'll be very complex in the case of Greece, which is why it is a tragedy in some way, caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. But yes, I'd like if you can come back on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Every speaker will have 3 minutes, and after 2 minutes, I will tap on the mic for you to sum up, please. If you could keep your hands up, that would help. And okay, so after this speaker is going to be yes, that man over here. Okay.
I'd like to thank Panos for his hugely informative and forensic analysis of what has happened in Greece. And it seems to me that it is of immense relevance to us in Britain today, because remember, we haven't yet had our Ochi moment, which was of stupendous proportions, the way in which Tsipras could mobilize both the left and centre and unite the different generations in Greece was a huge political earthquake. And our political earthquake is yet to come when Jeremy Corbyn enters number 10, when hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. But I think the value of what Panos has reminded us today is that the wave of left reformism is an important wave for us, but it doesn't necessarily automatically benefit us. And that I think we have to face up to the fact, comrades, that we have played a hugely honourable role in the election campaign, in the Grenfell Towers campaign, just as the SEC comrades did in Greece over those very, very difficult times. But we also have to recognise that it is going to be very hard and very tough for us over the next 2 years. And therefore the clarity of the politics that SEC have maintained in the face of massive pressure, both from the Communist Party on the one hand and from Syriza when they were in the ascendancy, and from Syriza as they sink into pessimism, has been huge in Greece. But we must expect no less pressure over the next 3 or 4 years. And therefore, when Panos tells us that they are looking to Greece for support and encouragement, we learn from the experience of Greece and recognise that we are entering a period, a substantial period of heightened class struggle, which will put our organisation critically to the test.
Okay. I'd also encourage anybody, if they would like to just ask a very basic question as well, to please do so. So after the speaker will be the speaker. Yes, the one in the white shirt over there. Yep, that's you. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Panos, the first point I would make is that the analysis here really reaffirms the need for revolutionary politics because, revolutionary socialists have always understood the dangers of managing capitalism, and Syriza is just the latest example of that. But obviously that's not the end of the story, because when Syriza came into government, it was on the wave, as Panos says, of a left surge. And that left surge is everywhere. But the issue for revolutionary socialists is that left surge is, generally speaking, being expressed as left reformist. That's what's happening. So in Ireland, how we're trying to relate to that surge is through people before profit. And in terms of, Panos talks about the need to be very clear with people of the limitations of managing capitalism. We agree with that. And therefore, in our programme, we say things like, we are for cancelling the bankers' debt. There was 65 billion of bankers' debt put onto the Irish taxpayers, one of the I think it was the highest after Greece in the Eurozone. So we have that as we call it red lines. So if that red line wouldn't be met, then we wouldn't govern. Other things like, reversing the cuts, breaking with the fiscal rules. In other words, we have these demands that are both concrete, common sense demands, but that challenge, to allow us to be in a space that allows other people to come in, because there's vast amounts of people now across the world, in Ireland, in Europe, who are looking for new alternatives, who are looking for hope, who are looking for challenges, but who haven't yet fully worked out where they stand on these issues. So I think it's up to us, as the revolutionary left, to really come up and step up to the plate and really think, how are we relating to these people? What are we going to do to make sure that we are relevant? Because if this is a race for the future, we have to be in that race. And that means we have to have the deepest roots possible in the communities that we're in. In every community, we can't answer that question for everybody, but in our own communities, we get out, we knock doors, we deliver newsletters, we talk about things like green bins, we talk about every issue that would relate to an ordinary, people who are being hammered by austerity, we're there trying to relate to those people. So I think, the analysis that we had today is about looking outwards, making sure that we're relevant, and making sure that when the race comes, we're in the lead.
Okay, the speakers will be followed by the man in the black T-shirt there.
Panos mentioned Jeremy Corbyn and the inspiration from the Corbyn success in the election that can feed back into Greece. It's very important that we take the lessons from Syriza into the success of Corbyn and here. This is Owen Jones. Owen Jones, probably one of the most popular left-wing political commentators in Britain. After Corbyn's getting just over 40% of the vote in the election, Labour is now permanently transformed, he wrote in the Guardian. Its policy programme cannot and will not be taken away. That's bollocks. Corbyn doesn't even have the support of a majority of his own MPs. A year ago, 172 Labour MPs voted to get rid of him and fought tooth and nail to ditch Corbyn. More than 100 Labour MPs, 4 weeks before the election, were prepared to quit the Labour Party immediately after the election and set up an alternative. And they haven't all lost their seats. They're all still there, not supporting Corbyn. And that's without the opposition of the British ruling class and Whitehall to a Corbyn government. It's without the opposition of the institutions of global capital that strangled Syriza, the troika that Panos talked about. It's without the power of the state that ultimately the army, the judiciary and so on, that would be turned on a left reformist government, as we've seen in working class history, as happened in Chile in the 70s and so on. So recognising that the battle is nowhere near anything like, the battle is just beginning. Nothing's been won as yet is vital. Possibly the other most popular left-wing political columnist in the national press is Paul Mason. And I don't want anybody to think that I wander around with quotes from Paul Mason in my pocket, but I did happen to have this in my bag. Paul Mason, this is writing in The Guardian last August, so 2 months after Corbyn was re-elected as Labour leader. He's writing about the British secret state. The secret state is large, but it is under much stronger legislative control, and he's talking about than compared to 40 years ago. Should a left-wing Labour Party come to power, it is likely to be able to govern relatively free of politicised sabotage from the state. Really? Really? Paul Mason is somebody who comes from an organisation close to our tradition. This is abject nonsense. It's also very dangerous nonsense. Trotsky, at the time of the German Revolution, urged the Russian comrades in 1918 that everyone should learn German because the future of the struggle for working class emancipation, the future of the Russian revolution would be tied to Germany. Now it's our duty to learn the lessons of the Greek experience and take them into amongst Labour supporters and so on. And one of them is the need to have an independent organisation to carrying quite different ideas from reformism into the struggle.
Okay, this speaker will be followed by the woman over here in the front.
There is no tragedy of Syriza, because only for those who hope that Syriza was not was something else than a bourgeois party, and Syriza is a bourgeois party, and defend the rules and the interest of the oppressors, and it has always been that way, and since and when the sick on the SWP made illusions that Syriza was not was not a reformist populist bourgeois party, that was the tragedy for the workers who are fighting in streets since 10 years now, and that's, and even if the SWP want to say that is against the EU, the European Union, when it counts, when at the referendum, the sick had made clear that he supports Syriza and he supports the European Union. At the time when we with the Spartacist League did call for a no vote in the referendum and give a critical support to the KKU when he was against the EU before the referendum in the elections in 2015, and we urge you to break with the illusion in Syriza in United
Can you wind up now, please?
Popular Unity to build a revolutionary party.
Okay, this speaker will be followed by the man standing in the purple shirt at the very back. Yeah.
You can probably claw back a bit of time with me because this is quite a straightforward question. I was receiving messages while Panos was talking from a comrade and friend in Athens who enjoined me to ask if Panos could say some more about the historic factionalism of the Greek left and how he felt or whether he felt there were future possibilities for greater unity of the left and within the left in Greece. That's it.
This speaker will be followed by the young man over here.
Trotsky, writing in 1935, says it's impossible to make historical predictions which don't burn out some of the intermediate stages. And the intermediate stages matter In Britain in particular, we're in a different situation to that of Greece, and getting our left government, our Syriza government, will require a massive struggle which will unite people inside and outside the Labour Party against the Tories. And that joint struggle will be extremely important for us to go through together. But in the course of that, a very clear question emerges, and it's a question, actually, of Marxism 2017. Are you best to organise in the Labour Party, or are you best to organise outside it? It's a central question. It's raised in every meeting in 1,000 different ways. And I want to argue that the experience of Greece has shown that the comrades in SEC and Anti-austerity were correct in their position of being outside Syriza. Because at the moments that were crucial, when they had to organise the strikes and the anti-racist occupations and the anti-racist struggles against Golden Dawn, they were not held back by the fact that it was their government that was implementing the policies which were attacking working class people. They were free to organise and to agitate and to push forward in a way which cleared the way for the struggles that were necessary to oppose the retreats and to attempt to bring about a much more fundamental change inside society. And this matters for us. This matters for us not because Jeremy Corbyn is an appalling sellout and there's nothing to see here. The comrade who says it's just one bourgeois party following another, nonsense. Anyone who is unmoved by the surge inside the working class which is represented by the rise of Syriza or the rise of Jeremy Corbyn is a desiccated sectarian. Anybody who stops there isn't thinking the matter through. Because you can say it will be different in Britain, but the truth is we know the pressure will come on the British left government just as it did on Syriza, just as it did on Hollande in France. And you can say Jeremy Corbyn will be different, but be honest, the best anti-war leader the Labour Party has had since the 1930s was unable or unwilling to put opposition to Trident nuclear missiles in the manifesto at the 2017 election. Be honest, the best anti-racist to lead the Labour Party for generations has conceded on the question of freedom of movement, of migrants and refugees coming to Britain. Those are a harbinger of the sorts of pressures that will come in the future. That's not to write Jeremy Corbyn off. It's not to think there isn't a surge happening. But unless we organise now outside the Labour Party for the struggles in the workplaces and the streets that are necessary, we will be selling people short. We need to organise, we need to agitate, we need to tell the truth politically what's happening and to create revolutionary alternatives.
Okay, this person will be followed by the woman sat there in the middle. Thanks.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming here and presenting this very important topic. I'm actually coming from a country which... I'm coming from a country which is actually a neighbor of Greece, and we have... I guess it's important to address this issue about solidarity because in some ways, in my country at least, we have this notion, this prejudice that to some extent the Greek people have brought this to themselves, which is, I mean, if you read the history, you would know that that's not true, but still it's something that is a prejudice that is there, and it is hurting us from helping each other out. And I have some questions about, first of all, about political reforms. Is there any projects about, for example, workers owning part of large companies? Because I know this is a very effective way to govern the working conditions and any cuts which may be brought. Also, there is something that is like a bit of a new movement going on about because Greece is unable, even in 100 years, to repay that huge debt. There is a movement to, for example, take ecological resources from it, land or otherwise. So is there a fight against that, to like even political or legal fight against that land grabbing? And finally, there are alternative spaces going on in like being created in Greece. I know some in Thessaloniki. I guess there are a lot of in Athens. It's sort of a way. It's a bottom-up way to for people to develop themselves, to produce by themselves, to be self-sustainable. So, can you speak more about this, please? Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. This speaker will be followed by the woman. It's a young Asian woman who's just sat here. Okay.
What is amazing about the Greek situation is the speed of the events. Not only the speed, but the incredible things that people in 2015 wouldn't have believed that Syriza would have turned so quickly. And I think it was Lenin that said there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happens. And that's the kind of period we're in. And so when people come and make criticisms of Antasia and SEC, we have to be very clear that what we in Ireland, we were under huge pressure. People were saying, why won't Antasia go into Syriza, etc.? And thank goodness they did not, because they wouldn't be in a position now to speak with credibility about Syriza and its failure. And if you look in in Ireland, Sinn Féin were way up for Syriza, waving Greek flags and so on. They've said nothing since that fateful July of 2015. So the lessons are really, really important. And I think understanding that, we can understand how we can both be fantastically, as we were when Syriza came to power, fantastically enthusiastic for Corbyn, but realise, probably even quicker than the Greeks have, how he will come under pressure from the EU, from the state, from the crisis of capitalism. And that expression is an independent socialist presence, both understanding the possibilities of fight back, but understanding that the limitations of it, and the expression of that is an independent revolutionary socialist alternative that can both be enthusiastic of it and also learn the lessons from it.
Okay, sorry, this is going to have to be the last speaker. My apologies to other people that have put up their hands, but there is an awful lot there that Panos has to sum up on, not least of which, of course, is the historical factionalism on the left. So,
okay. I just think that people need to know how the economy works in not just European countries, but all over the world. I don't really understand it myself, because what I want to know, I've got a question. What caused the Greek deficit? What caused them to have so much debt? I heard it was something to do with the German market, that the Germans were selling large amounts of overproduced goods to Greece, and Greece was not able to sell them on or something. But could somebody explain what happened? How did the debt occur? And how does the economy work? Why is it we need to pay the banks? So I just want to know.
Okay, so I'll hand over to Panos.
Right. Well, first of all, on the question of the Greek debt, because obviously that's very important. The official theory that's doing the rounds is that the Greek economy wasn't competitive. The German economy is very competitive, and that's what's brought the situation about, that the Greek state is in debt. Now, this is very superficial. We have to take into account other things. First thing, the crisis of the system may be very acute today, but it hasn't started today. There's been a series of crises since the 70s. And a weak capitalism, like the Greek capitalism, got indebted in every wave of the crisis. The Greek debt did not start in the year 2000. It started in the year 1980. The first debt crisis in Greece was 30 years ago. Now, they managed to somehow survive over that, but the level of debt was 100% of gross domestic product in the year 2000. So already there was a problem there. It became much worse when the wave of speculation in 2007, 2008 came to an end. The banks were very happy to lend to Greece in the early years of 2000. There were no questions of are you competitive or are you not competitive. So it's a bit cheeky on the bankers to say that, well, the Greeks are not competitive, that's why they're in debt. The bankers knew very well where they were sending the money. It was very profitable to send the money to Greece. That's how the Greek debt was swollen. And when the bubble burst, well, one of the first victims was a country that had a history of debt. So on the question of do we have the right to cancel the debt? Absolutely yes. It is not our debt. It wasn't created by us. It's not workers in Greece that are being lazy and that's why they're unproductive and so on. It's the bankers that were being too clever by half and they ended up with a mess. So they should pay for that. On the question of people taking over factories, a fight back over land grab, over the pillaging of the Greek economy, well, this is a true picture. Let's be clear. The wave of privatizations that have been forced on Greece by the bailout agreements means exactly that large multinationals can go cherry-picking in Greece and everything that's on offer they get. Most of them are German multinationals. Yeah, okay. The state airline is privatized. Who gets it? Lufthansa. The airport in Athens is privatized. Who gets it? Hochtief. And so on and so forth. I don't need to name all the names. So closures, bankruptcies, and privatizations. There is a fight back, and it involves people organizing occupations. The most important occupation was when they shut down the Greek Broadcasting Corporation, ERT. That was a sudden death operation 4 years ago, when the then government, Tory government, said, that's it, we are shutting it down, 2,000 people are sacked, that's the end of the story. The answer was an occupation that lasted for months. The workers running the Greek Broadcasting Corporation. And that's what forced Syriza, when they came into office, to reopen ERT. Now ERT is operating. So there's a very successful example of a fight back against pillaging. Now, the problem is that not everybody on the left in Greece accepted this important struggle. There were a lot of sections, anarchists, communist sectarians, the ERT workers. They're a privileged lot. They worked for the state, they had steady jobs, and so on and so forth. So they wrote it off. That was a big mistake. We didn't do the same. For us, for every situation like that, when people are fighting back against closures or privatizations, we say, do it the Earth way. Occupy, keep the place running. That's the way you'll get your jobs back and keep the multinationals away from grabbing your company. The question of how far the control of a left government extends over the state institutions. Now, this is shown in the extreme in the Greek case. There were surveys during the election. How did the police vote? 50% of police officers voted for the Nazis, Golden Dawn. That happened in 2013. It happened again in 2015. It was an obvious case where a left-wing government should go in and clean the place up. It was actually a Syriza promise that they would democratize the Greek police. And the obvious step would be to clear out all the Nazi cells inside the Greek police. Has it happened? No, it hasn't. Not at all. They're still there. We are continuously confronted with cases where the police, the local police, police officers are operating alongside Golden Dawn thugs. And it's a very clear indication of the sort of fight that is necessary when a left-wing party, a left reformist party comes into office. It is us that have to carry out the struggle against this sort of thing. We can't expect that it will be done from the top up by the ministers. They may continue talking about it, but they don't do it. So, on the question of dealing with Syriza, this has been very, very important, and I think I need to stress one important point. There was a wave of struggle. There was a wave of radicalization and politicization inside the Greek working class, and that's how Syriza got elected into office in 2015. Now, that wave was not the work of Syriza alone. To a large extent, it was spontaneous. It was the work of the working class fighting back and through their own experience radicalizing. Also, it was the work of other sections of the left, including us. We have always considered that the surge that brought Syriza to power belongs to us as much as it belongs to Alexis Tsipras. We never accepted the idea that it was he, on his own, that created this. Many people accepted that. They said, oh, well, he's a young man, he doesn't carry a whole history of corruption behind him, never been tested, a fresh face in politics, he talks left, that's how Syriza came into office. Not true, not true. This ignores all the fight back in the previous years, so when Syriza came to office and the first signs of wavering were clear, our first slogan was, cancel the debt, don't cancel your promises. There were mass rallies in Athens and in many cities in the first 6 months of 2015, leading up to the referendum in the summer. Now, in that period, we had to have a policy like that. Demonstrate alongside the people who voted for Syriza, and at the same time raise the question of how do we get all these promises implemented. That has been very important. That has given us both the confidence when Syriza turned completely to the right to continue fighting, and also the roots, the connections with people to fight back. The connections in workplaces. This is very important. I think that Greece may be the country where the wave strike was very, very pronounced during the last 10 years. There were occupations of the squares, there were all sorts of movements, but there were strikes continuously. And that is an aspect of the radicalization that is very, very important, because, comrades, we have to take into account the lessons of other countries, the lessons of Egypt. In Egypt, the occupation of Tahrir Square was an inspiration for all of us everywhere, but it won when the workers in Cairo started moving as workers, not just as demonstrators in Tahrir Square. When the strike wave started taking off, that was the end of Mubarak. So the power of working class is specific to that class, and we must not forget that. We haven't forgotten that. This is part of our effort continuously throughout this period. And I think now is the time where the difference shows. When there are strikes against the Syriza government, this is very, very important in shaping the political atmosphere. So this is the stage that we have reached. We are trying to relate to this fight back. Obviously, it can't last forever. This is a period that how it ends will depend on what happens not just in Greece but in other countries as well. So the prospect of a surge to the left in other countries is very, very crucial for us in Greece, for our confidence and for our tenacity in building a left alternative in leading the fight back to victory.